A powerful politician hides his secret fortune inside a mattress. But when his wife's anger throws it into the trash, fate takes a shocking turn. That same mattress lands in the hands of a homeless man and his wife, turning their suffering into a miracle. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment for more interesting stories. The mansion stood tall at the edge of the city, its golden gates glittering in the afternoon sun. From the outside, Richard and Vanessa's life looked enviable. Expensive cars lined the driveway, servants polished floors until they shone, and guests whispered that the couple were blessed beyond measure. But behind those tall gates, peace was a stranger. Richard was a politician, powerful and feared. Money flowed to him like a river, not by honesty, but by cunning. He was corrupt to the core, cutting corners, taking bribes, and pocketing funds meant for his people. His allies praised him in public, but in secret, they called him ruthless. Richard wore wealth like armor, but beneath it, he was a man ruled by greed and desire. That afternoon, he left the governor's office with a heavy brown envelope tucked under his arm. It was constituent money, millions approved for community projects, schools, and boreholes. But Richard already knew none of it would reach the poor. As he walked to his car, his lips curved into a satisfied smile. His driver opened the door, and he leaned back in the leather seat, already plotting how to spend it. Instead of going home to his wife, Richard went to a hotel on the other side of the city. A tall glass of whiskey was waiting for him. And so was Anita, one of his many mistresses, dressed in a silk gown that clung to her curves. She welcomed him with a kiss, her perfume thick in the air. "To your success," she said, raising her glass. Richard chuckled, his gold wristwatch glinting as he clinked his glass against hers. "Success indeed. Abuha is waiting for me tomorrow. 3 days of comfort, no stress, and no nagging wife." They both laughed, and the night melted into pleasure. Richard's phone buzzed once, twice, then over and over again. He glanced at the screen. Vanessa? He let it ring, ignored it, and tossed the phone aside. Anita smiled and drew closer. "Forget her," she whispered. "You are mine tonight." And Richard did just that. Back at the mansion, Vanessa lay wide awake in their massive bed. The silk sheets felt cold against her skin. She stared at the ceiling, the chandelier above casting shadows on the walls. On the pillow beside her, Richard's space was empty, untouched. She picked up her phone again and dialed his number. The ring echoed in her ear, each tone heavier than the last. She waited, praying he would pick up, but the call ended without an answer. She tried again. Still nothing. Her chest tightened. Vanessa was no fool. She knew where her husband was. Richard had always been unfaithful. She had caught the smell of foreign perfume on his shirts, seen strange numbers flash on his phone, even heard whispers among the servants. Still, every time he left without a word, it cut her like a knife. She turned on her side, hugging a pillow. Memories of their early years haunted her, when Richard held her hand proudly, when he told her she was his queen, when their laughter filled this very room. Now, laughter had turned to silence. Promises had turned to lies. Her phone buzzed suddenly. She snatched it up, only to see a message from a friend, not Richard. With a groan, she tossed it aside and buried her face in her hands. "Why am I still here?" she whispered into the emptiness. The servants moved quietly through the mansion below, cleaning and locking doors. They avoided looking at her whenever she walked past, for they too knew Richard was gone. In the silence of the night, their madam's loneliness was louder than any cry. Vanessa rose from the bed, and went to the window. Outside, the garden lights glowed softly. The fountain trickled as though mocking her. Beauty outside, emptiness within. She wrapped her arms around herself, fighting the sting of tears. By the third call, she gave up. Her husband had chosen to ignore her, to spend another night in the arms of another woman while she slept alone in their palace. The mattress beneath her felt too large, too empty. She curled on one side, staring at the shadows on the wall. The mansion was grand, but her heart was hollow. The night stretched on, and though Richard and Vanessa were bound by marriage, they were already worlds apart. The refuse dump stretched wide under the blazing afternoon sun. Piles of broken chairs, torn clothes, rusty cans, and plastic bottles filled the air with a sour stench. Flies buzzed in clouds, rising each time a scavenger's stick turned the trash. Among them stood David, his faded shirt soaked with sweat, his trousers torn at the knees, and a sack slung across his shoulder. His hands were blackened with dirt, his face lined with exhaustion. He bent, picked a crushed bottle, and dropped it into the sack. Then he straightened, staring at the endless dump. For a moment, the noise around him faded. His mind drifted back to the man he used to be. He once wore crisp shirts and polished shoes. He remembered the cold air of the bank's office, the way customers respected him when he signed documents with a steady hand. He was Mr. David, the young banker with promise. His future was bright, his plans sharp. He had told Grace, his wife, that one day they would buy land, build a house with tall windows, and fill it with children's laughter. She believed him, but one morning changed it all. He could still see the manager's heavy face, the pity in his eyes. "David, you have been loyal, but the bank is cutting staff. Today is your last day." The words had struck like a hammer. He carried his belongings in a small carton, a pen, a notebook, a photo of him and Grace smiling at the beach. He walked out into the sun, and the whole city suddenly felt heavier. Grace had cried when he told her, but she wiped her tears quickly, held his hand, and whispered, "We will be fine. God will help us." David blinked, pulled back to the dump by the cry of a hawker. He bent again, this time picking a rusted spoon. His back ached, but his mind refused to rest. He remembered the fire. The night was red with flames. People screamed, water buckets clanged, smoke swallowed the sky. Grace had been cooking when shouts filled the corridor. "Fire! Fire!" A neighbor's stove had exploded, and the inferno spread like a mad beast. He had tried to save their documents, their certificates, even the little savings they had left. But the flames were too quick, too greedy. Smoke choked his lungs. Grace pulled him by the arm, shouting through coughs, "Leave it, David. Leave it, or we will die." They escaped with nothing, only the clothes on their bodies. By the time the fire service arrived, their small apartment was nothing but ashes. Years of sweat, gone. Now in the dump, David closed his eyes against the memory. He could still smell the smoke, still hear the crackling wood. He clenched his fists and then forced himself to keep picking scraps. Hunger did not wait for sorrow. After the fire, they had moved into an uncompleted building at the edge of the city. No doors, no windows, only bare walls and dust. Grace spread a wrapper on the floor every night, and they lay side by side, staring at the ceiling. Sometimes rats scurried past them. Sometimes rain leaked through the blocks. Yet Grace would hold his hand and whisper, "David, don't give up. Tomorrow will be better." Her faith was the only warmth left. "Hey, move there," another scavenger shouted, snapping David out of his thoughts. He stepped aside as a cart rattled past, loaded with rusted iron. The man pushing it whistled, sweat glistening on his back. David sighed and bent again, his sack only half filled. He hated this life. The endless digging in trash, the looks of pity from strangers, the ache in his bones. But what choice did he have? No company called him back. No one cared for his certificates, now burnt to ashes. This was survival. This was all that was left. That afternoon, as he straightened again, sweat dripping from his chin, he whispered under his breath, "Grace, one day, we will rise again." He tightened his grip on the sack, his eyes scanning the endless pile of waste. He did not know what tomorrow held. He did not know that fate was already moving pieces in silence, preparing a strange gift that would cross his path. For now, he was just a man in the refuse dump, scavenging plastic and metal to stay alive. But destiny was watching, and the mattress that carried another man's secret fortune, was waiting for him just around the corner of fate. The afternoon sun baked the city in relentless heat. Inside the mansion, the air was hotter still, thick with rage and bitter words. "3 nights again, Richard?" Vanessa's voice rose like fire. She stood in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp with fury. "You disappear whenever you please, then stroll back here, smelling of perfume that is not mine. Do you take me for a fool?" Richard loosened his tie with a scowl. His shirt was crumpled, his steps unsteady from drink. "I told you, Vanessa. I had meetings. You will not question me like a child." "Meetings?" she scoffed. "In another woman's bed, perhaps. Do you think money blinds me? Do you think this mansion hides your filth?" The servants froze in the corners, their faces lowered, afraid to move. Richard's jaw tightened. His voice dropped to a dangerous growl. "Enough, woman. I provide for you. I built this house. I put food in your mouth, and still you nag like a market woman." Vanessa stepped closer, trembling with rage. "Food, cars, clothes. What use are they when you shame me in this city? You call yourself a man, but you are nothing but a cheat and a coward." Richard's hand shot up. A sharp slap echoed across the marble floor. Vanessa staggered back, her cheek burning red, but her pride held her upright. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "You will not break me, Richard," she hissed. "You can hit me, but you will never silence me." Richard's breathing was heavy, his chest rising and falling. With a roar, he snatched his car keys. "I will not waste my time with your madness." He stormed out of the mansion, slamming the door so hard the chandelier trembled. Tires screeched as his car tore out of the compound, leaving a trail of dust. The silence that followed was deafening. Vanessa stood alone in the grand living room, her chest rising and falling, her hands trembling with rage. Her eyes swept across the room, the broken vase on the floor, the glass table gleaming in the sunlight, the expensive television glowing darkly. Suddenly, her fury erupted. With a scream, she hurled the remote at the TV. The screen shattered with a sharp crack, sparks flashing as glass spilled to the marble. Servants gasped in shock, but dared not move. Her rage drove her outside into the compound. She seized a heavy flower pot and flung it with all her strength at Richard's black SUV. The windshield cracked with a deafening smash. She grabbed a stone from the garden path and hurled it at another car. The glass exploded into glittering fragments. "You will feel my pain, Richard," she shouted into the hot air. "You will know what it means to destroy a home." Guards stood rooted by the gate, exchanging nervous glances, but none dared interfere. They had seen enough storms in this mansion to know when to stay silent. Vanessa's chest heaved, her eyes blazing. Then, as though possessed, she turned back into the house. Her fury led her to the master bedroom. The wide mattress sat on the frame, innocent and still. Without a second thought, Vanessa gripped it and dragged with wild strength. Foam scraped against the tiles, sweat streamed down her face, but she would not stop. Step by step, she pulled it down the staircase, across the corridor, and out into the blazing sun. "Let him come back and meet nothing," she spat, her voice breaking. With one final shove, she toppled the mattress onto the refuse heap by the roadside. Dust rose in thick clouds, flies circled lazily. Vanessa wiped her sweaty brow with the back of her hand, then turned and stormed back into the mansion, slamming the gate behind her. The mattress lay abandoned on the trash, baking in the afternoon heat. What she did not know was that hidden deep inside its layers were bundles of foreign currency. Richard's secret lifeline, his millions in pounds, euros, and dollars. The next day, under the same scorching sun, David dragged his sack of scraps along the roadside. His shirt clung to his back with sweat, his face weary but determined. He bent to pick rusted cans, plastic bottles, and iron rods, anything that could earn him a few coins. Then he saw it. By the refuse heap, lying awkwardly in the dust, was a mattress. David stopped, blinking against the sunlight. His tired heart quickened. He dropped his sack and walked closer. The surface was dusty, but still firm. He pressed his hand against it, and his lips parted in awe. "A mattress," he whispered. For weeks, he and Grace had slept on bare cement in the uncompleted building they now called home. His wife's back ached every morning, and his own body felt broken each dawn. This was more than foam. This was comfort. This was a gift. Without hesitation, David bent and gripped one end. It was heavier than he expected. Sweat rolled down his forehead as he strained against the weight. "Even if it crushes me, I will carry it," he muttered through clenched teeth. Step by step, under the stares of traders and passers-by, David dragged the mattress away from the trash heap. Some laughed, some shook their heads, but he ignored them all. To him, this was gold. By the time he reached the uncompleted building, his arms ached, his chest burned, but his spirits soared. He slid the mattress into their corner and called softly, "Grace." She turned, her eyes widening in shock. "A mattress? David, where did you find it?" "Beside the trash," he said proudly. "We will no longer sleep on the floor." Grace touched the surface gently, her eyes brimming with relief. She smiled faintly. This is truly a blessing. Neither of them knew that deep inside this mattress was a treasure greater than they could imagine. For David and Grace, it was hope. For Richard, it was ruin. And for fate, it was the storm that had only just begun. The mansion was quiet after Richard left. The sound of his car tires screeching away still echoed in Vanessa's mind. She stood in the middle of the living room, breathing heavily, surrounded by broken glass and scattered pieces of her rage. Servants hid in corners, afraid to move. None of them dared to touch the broken television or the fallen furniture. They knew better than to interfere when Madame was in one of her storms. Vanessa sank into a chair, her face still stinging from Richard's slap. She held her cheek, her eyes filling with tears, but she quickly wiped them away. Crying was weakness, and she refused to appear weak. All she could feel was burning anger. At her husband, at his endless lies, at herself, for still staying in this cage of wealth. Richard had been gone for 3 days before showing up tonight, smelling of alcohol and perfume that was not hers. She knew what he was doing. He had always been unfaithful, always chasing after younger women. At first, she had shouted, begged, even threatened to leave, but years of betrayal had turned her heart into stone. Now, all she had left was anger. Hours passed. The servants slowly cleaned up, their heads bowed low. Vanessa went upstairs into the master bedroom. The wide bed looked too large, too empty. She remembered how, in the early years, she and Richard used to laugh here, share secrets here. Now it was only a battlefield, a place where accusations and violence lived. Her eyes returned to the empty space where the mattress had once been. She remembered dragging it out earlier, her rage boiling over. She had thrown it away without a second thought, convinced she was punishing Richard. She did not know she had just thrown away his secret kingdom. Meanwhile, Richard sat in his car, his fingers drumming angrily on the steering wheel. His veins throbbed in his forehead as he lit a cigarette. He hated how Vanessa spoke to him, how she always challenged him. Ungrateful woman, he muttered to himself. I gave her everything, money, clothes, cars, and this is how she repays me. But beneath the anger, fear gnawed at him. That mattress. His mind raced back to it. He had stuffed it carefully with bundles of hard cash, pounds, euros, dollars, his emergency savings. Money no one knew about, not even Vanessa. If anything happened to him politically, if the government turned against him, that mattress was his lifeline. What if she touched it? What if she found it? His cigarette trembled in his fingers. No, she wouldn't dare, he whispered to himself. But deep down, unease grew in his chest. The next morning, the mansion buzzed with whispers. Servants spoke in low tones about the fight, about the mattress. One gardener who had been outside swore he saw Madame dragging it across the compound the day before. The story spread quickly, each servant passing it to another like fire on dry grass. Vanessa, however, was still furious. She sat in the dining room, sipping tea with shaky hands, replaying the fight in her mind. She expected Richard to return that morning, shouting and cursing as always. She was ready for another battle. But Richard did not return that morning, nor that afternoon, nor that evening. Instead, he disappeared again, spending the next 2 nights in a hotel with one of his mistresses, drowning his anger in alcohol. But no matter how much he drank, he could not silence the thought of the mattress. Something inside him screamed that he needed to check it. On the 3rd day, Richard finally returned. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt half-buttoned, his steps unsteady from drink. Vanessa was waiting in the living room, her arms crossed, her anger simmering. 3 days again, she shouted, "Richard, do you think I am your slave? Do you think you can abandon this house whenever you like?" Richard ignored her words. His eyes darted around, restless, searching. He rushed past her, taking the stairs 2 at a time. Vanessa followed, furious. "Don't walk away from me," she screamed. "You come home after days and you don't even greet me? You disrespect me in my own house?" Richard threw open the bedroom door. His eyes went straight to the bed and froze. The mattress was gone. The room looked empty, the frame bare. He turned to Vanessa, his voice shaking. "Where is the mattress?" Vanessa raised her chin proudly. "I threw it away. You think you can keep sleeping here while you shame me? I dragged it out myself." Richard's face drained of color. He grabbed her shoulders, shaking her. "What did you say? You threw it away?" "Yes," she screamed, pulling away. "I threw it away. Go and lie with your women, Richard." You don't deserve this house. You don't deserve me." His roar cut her off. "You fool! Do you know what you've done? My money, all my life savings, pounds, euros, dollars, everything was inside that mattress." Vanessa staggered back, her hand over her mouth. Her eyes widened in horror. No, it can't be," she whispered. "Tell me you're lying, Richard. Please tell me you're lying." Richard's fists clenched as he shouted again, his voice cracking with panic. "I am not lying. You have thrown away my fortune." Vanessa's knees buckled, and she collapsed onto the floor, weeping. The servants outside the door froze in shock. The golden couple's secret had just been exposed. The mattress was gone, and with it, the fate of two families was about to change forever. Richard tore through the mansion gates like a madman, Vanessa trailing behind him with tears streaking down her face. The guards stared in confusion as he barked at them. Did anyone see the mattress? The big one from the master bedroom. The guards exchanged nervous glances. One of them stepped forward slowly. "Sir, Madam dragged it out yesterday. We thought she wanted it gone." She pushed it to the big refuse heap by the market road. Richard's knees almost buckled. "You fools! Why didn't you bring it back? That was not trash. That was my life." Vanessa covered her mouth, shaking her head. The weight of her mistake crashed down on her chest. "Richard, I didn't know. Please forgive me," she sobbed. But Richard pushed her hand away. "Forgive you. You have destroyed me." His voice was broken, desperate. Without another word, he dashed out, jumped into his car, and sped toward the market road, his tires screaming on the hot asphalt. Vanessa stumbled after him, trying to catch her breath, but it was too late. The chase had begun. The refuse heap stood like a small hill near the busy roadside. By the time Richard arrived, sweat pouring down his face, the place was almost empty. Women selling vegetables packed their baskets. Boys with carts loaded with scraps had already left. Flies buzzed over torn nylon bags and broken chairs. But the mattress was not there. Richard ran around the heap, kicking through rags, overturning planks, shouting curses into the air. "Where is it? Where is my money?" Vanessa caught up, panting, her expensive sandals covered in dust. She looked at the trash, then at Richard, and broke into fresh sobs. "It's gone," she whispered. "Oh God, it's gone." Richard slammed his fists against the side of his car, his face twisted with fury and despair. The fortune he had spent years hiding, the wealth he trusted more than banks, had vanished into thin air. Morning sunlight poured through the open blocks of the uncompleted building. Dust floated in the air like tiny gold. Grace woke first. David was still asleep, his arm across his face, breathing softly. For the first time in months, his back was not pressed to hard cement. The mattress felt like a small miracle. Grace tied her scarf and picked up the broom. She liked to sweep early, before the other squatters became active. As she lifted one side of the mattress to sweep under it, she noticed it did not move easily. She frowned. She tried again, using both hands, but it felt unusually heavy. She muttered. "This is strange." Curiosity pushed her to press her palm along the side. Her fingers felt a long, hard shape where foam should be soft. Her heart began to race. She fetched her sewing blade and made a small cut along the seam. Her hand slipped inside and touched paper, thick, flat bundles. She pulled one out. Her breath caught. Money. Not naira, foreign notes, pounds, euros, dollars. Grace froze, her hand shaking. She pulled out another bundle, then another. The mattress was stuffed with cash. "David," she called, her voice trembling. David stirred, rubbed his eyes, and sat up. When he saw the bundles on the mattress, his mouth fell open. He came closer, touching one with disbelief. "Grace, this is real. This is real money." For a long moment, they just stared at the fortune, their breaths quick and shallow. Then Grace's face changed. She clasped her hands together, fear clouding her joy. "David, listen. We cannot keep this. Someone must be looking for it. What if they come here? What if it brings trouble?" David shook his head firmly. "No, this is not theft. It was thrown away, Grace. You saw me carry this mattress from the trash heap. If anyone wanted it, they would not have dumped it there." "But what if?" Grace pressed, her eyes wide. "The person is searching even now. What if this money belongs to dangerous people? What if it brings us a curse? We have survived with little. Why risk everything by keeping what is not ours?" David's jaw tightened. Hunger, pain, and months of humiliation burned inside him. He pointed at the bundles. "Grace, look at this. Look at what God has placed in our hands. Do you remember the nights we went to bed hungry? Do you remember the fire that burned our certificates and everything we owned? Grace, this is our blessing. Do not call it a curse." Grace bit her lip, torn between her conscience and her husband's fire. "David, I am afraid." He softened his voice, taking her hands in his. "I know, my love. But hear me. No one will come for this. No one knows it is here. If we return it, who do we even give it to? The police? The same people who mock us? They will share it and laugh at our foolishness. But if we keep it wisely, we can rebuild our lives. We can live like human beings again." Grace looked at him for a long moment. Then she let out a shaky breath and nodded slowly. "If we must keep it, then we must be wise. No boasting, no wasting, no showing off. We will act as if nothing has changed." David smiled faintly and kissed her forehead. "Yes, that is wisdom." They carefully pushed the bundles back inside and stitched the seam closed. They agreed to take only one bundle at a time, using it quietly and with sense. Grace hid the first pack under the basin and washed her hands, as if washing away her fear. "Go to the market," she told David. "Buy food, buy a lock, but move calmly. Walk like every other man." David nodded, picked up his sack, and stepped into the hot morning sun. Grace sat by the mattress, whispering a prayer. "Lord, let this bring life, not death. Let it bring peace, not sorrow." The mattress lay still, its secret buried again. Outside, the world went on as usual. But inside their corner, destiny had shifted forever. The day Grace and David walked into the bureau with one bundle of notes, their hearts pounded. The man behind the counter tested the money carefully, holding it to the light, pressing it between his fingers, running it under a machine. Finally, he nodded. "Original," he said. He exchanged it for a thick envelope of naira. David and Grace walked out in silence, clutching the envelope as though it were fire. Only when they reached home did they breathe freely. The money was real. Their lives were about to change. The first thing they did was buy food. Bags of rice and beans, oil, tomatoes, meat. Grace filled the kitchen shelves of the uncompleted building where they still lived, smiling as she lined them neatly. "We will eat and be strong," she told David. That night, the smell of stew drifted out into the corridor, and for the first time in months, they ate until their stomachs were full. But Grace was not foolish. "David," she said, "we must not waste. We must not rush. If we show off, people will ask questions. We must move quietly." David agreed. Step by step they planned. A little for business, a little for land, a little for comfort. Within weeks, Grace opened a small foodstuff shop in the market. Women came daily to buy, calling her Madam Grace. David, too, made his first quiet move, buying land in a developing part of town. He was careful, keeping everything in order. But the biggest change came when they left the uncompleted building. David bought a modest but comfortable 3-bedroom house in town. It had tiled floors, clean paint, a borehole for water, and a gate. The day they moved in, Grace touched the walls and cried. "This is our home," she whispered, "our own." That night, they lay on a soft bed, full from a rich meal. David held her hand and said, "Grace, from the dust, we have risen." She smiled through her tears. "And we will not go back." Far away, Richard and Vanessa's world was breaking piece by piece. Since the day of the missing mattress, Richard had become restless. He shouted at everyone, at Vanessa, at the servants, even at the guards. He paced the mansion like a man haunted, drinking more than he ate, muttering about his lost money. Vanessa too had changed. Guilt weighed on her chest. She remembered dragging that mattress out in her anger. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it lying by the roadside. Sometimes she wished she could turn back time. Sometimes she wished she had walked away from Richard long ago. And then, as if fate wanted to punish them more, the political river began to dry up. The new governor reshuffled the cabinet. Contracts slowed. Bribes stopped. The money that once poured into Richard's hands now trickled weekly. Servants noticed. Salaries came late. The kitchen no longer overflowed with imported goods. Some staff whispered, "Ogre no get money again." Others quietly left in search of new work. The mansion still stood tall from the outside, but inside it was emptying of food, of staff, of peace. Richard blamed Vanessa. "You destroyed me. You threw away my life," he shouted again and again. Vanessa screamed back, but inside she was breaking. Every fight, every insult, every memory of the lost mattress tore her apart. Their home had turned into a prison of anger and regret. So while one couple moved from hunger to comfort, the other slipped from riches to ruin. David and Grace ate in peace, planned their future with care, and built their lives again. Richard and Vanessa fought in shadows, their golden palace turning cold. Fate had shifted its balance, and the mattress that carried hidden fortune had already chosen its side. One morning, the mansion was unusually quiet. Vanessa sat in the living room, her eyes swollen from sleepless nights. For the first time in a long while, she was not shouting. She was waiting. When Richard came down the stairs, she stood up slowly. Her voice was soft, almost broken. "Richard, I am sorry," she whispered, "from the depth of my heart. I let my anger destroy what I should have guarded. If I had known what was inside that mattress, I would never have touched it. Please, forgive me." Richard stopped. The words struck him. For years, he had only heard Vanessa's anger, never her surrender. He looked at her, this woman who had stood by him through wealth and disgrace, and his own heart softened. He sighed and lowered his head. "No, Vanessa. It is I who should ask for forgiveness. I caused all this. If I had treated you with love, if I had not cheated, if I had not lifted my hand against you, none of this would have happened. You would never have grown so bitter. I am the cause, not you." For a moment, both were silent. Then Richard stepped forward and held her hand. For the first time in many years, husband and wife apologized, not with pride, but with humility. Life changed after that. Richard sold off most of his expensive cars, keeping only one. The mansion was too big to maintain, so he shut down half the rooms and cut down their staff. The cooks and drivers left, until only one gateman and one maid remained. To survive, Richard opened a small business using what little savings he had left. He was no longer the mighty politician with hidden millions, but he was determined to provide honestly. Vanessa also returned to her old skill. She reopened her sewing machine, taking orders for clothes. The sound of stitching filled the once luxurious house. They were no longer the golden couple living in wasteful abundance, but in their new humility, there was peace. They managed, they survived, and little by little, they began to rebuild, not in wealth, but in understanding. Meanwhile, across town, David and Grace's world was blossoming. Their businesses had grown beyond their dreams. Grace's foodstuff shop had expanded into a large store with workers under her care. David's investments in land and housing began to bring steady returns. They were not super rich like the politicians, but they were far from poor. They had employees, respect, and comfort. What made their success even brighter was their humility. They remembered the days of hunger, the nights on bare cement, and the tears they shared. That memory guided them to stay wise. By December, their compound was decorated with lights. Workers brought them reports and wished them Merry Christmas. Grace supervised hampers for staff families. David planned the end-of-year bonuses. And in the midst of the bustle, Grace showed him 2 tickets. "Paris," she said with a smile. "For Christmas." David laughed and lifted her in his arms. "From sleeping in an abandoned building to vacationing in Paris," he said softly. "Truly, God lifted us." Grace kissed his cheek. "And may we never forget the journey." 2 couples, 2 fates. One lost fortune through anger and pride, but found humility in the end. The other found fortune by chance, but kept it through wisdom and patience. The mattress had changed both lives forever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe for more dramatic tales. Your support keeps us going, and we can't wait to bring you the next story.